If I had been astonished at first catching a glimpse of so outlandish an individual as Queequeg circulating among the polite society of a civilized town, that astonishment soon departed upon taking my first daylight stroll through the streets of New Bedford. In thoroughfares nigh the docks, any considerable seaport will frequently offer to view the queerest-looking nondescripts from foreign parts. Even in Broadway and Chestnut Street, Mediterranean mariners will sometimes jostle the affrighted ladies. Regent Street is not unknown to Lascars and Malays, and at Bombay and the Apollo Green, live Yankees have often scared the natives. But New Bedford beats all Water Street and Wapping. In these last-mentioned haunts you see only sailors, but in New Bedford, actual cannibals stand chatting at street corners, savages outright, many of whom yet carry on their bones unholy flesh. It makes a stranger stare. So, how are people doing?
I'm doing okay. I'm still deep in the Shakespeare tour, so I'm very tired, having sort of driven the length and breadth of England this week and done Shakespeare every evening. But it's all in the age of theatre.
Can you tell us about your shirt?
What, my T-shirt that says
Yes.
"Some have T-shirts thrust upon them."
That's got the air of really good merch about it, which always makes me interested.
It's definitely got the air of merch about it. It's the 12th Night T-shirt that we tout at the shows.
Excellent.
Oh, love it.
Were I in England, it would that alone would get me to the stage.
I'm going to go ahead and say anybody who's in England, yeah, by all means come and see it. Anybody who isn't, don't come specifically for the show. That would not be very sustainable. It's good, and I hope it would be worth it. But we're in the middle of a climate change-induced drought in England and in so much else of the world. So I'd say, yeah, it's not worth it for the climatic impact.
Yeah, so no airfare to come see you.
I'd say probably not. I'll try and come over your stateside with a play at some point. But
No, that'd be great. So you said that you've been driving all over England. So, like, how is that? Like, so, coming from the United States, which is this giant country, I'm pretty sure, like, England is about the size of North Carolina, more or less. So I'm in North Carolina. So does it feel like a lot to drive the breadth of England?
I suppose the kind of journeys that we're doing for you guys probably wouldn't really touch the sides. But to give you a sort of a view into a journey that I did yesterday, for example, I drove from Kent to Oxfordshire, and that was a drive of about sort of 3 hours, which probably is, I don't know, some states that's just a drive to the shops. I don't know. That's the sense that I get, that it's just that everything is just so disproportionately larger. I mean, I think I'm right in saying that, yeah, so like Texas is 3 times the size of the UK, for example. So, I really shouldn't be complaining.
No, I mean, you can complain. It's fine.
I say I shouldn't, but I will, because...
So that's your encounter with the streets right now, is driving all across them. Is it just in England that the tour is? It's not in
it is. We've been more or less up to the Welsh border, but not quite into Wales. Yeah.
Okay. So as somebody who's in the UK yourself, like there's a lot of demonyms in those aisles. There's a lot of so like, what would you consider yourself? If I were to like refer to you by nationality, would you consider yourself to be like, would you call yourself an Englishman, or like, what would you like say you are?
Oh, that's really, really interesting. I think any declaration like that cannot come without certain kind of nationalist undertones. Do I consider myself, would I ever introduce myself as an Englishman? No.
Okay.
Am I British? I mean, objectively, yes. There's a little bit of Welsh blood somewhere in our family, I think. But no, I mean, I used to be very, very positive and passionate about the fact that I am European. And then Brexit happened, and then that sort of claim became incredibly kind of tenuous. I was very, very proud of that as a part of my identity, and now with the laughing stock of Europe and everywhere else. So no, I don't know really. And then in terms of where I'm from, well, I'm from a little village in Cambridgeshire, which is kind of the Midlands. But then if I talk with somebody then who's from the proper Midlands, like sort of Nottingham, I get laughed out the door. So yeah, and this we're moving beautifully towards the wonderful tag yourself moment that we get in this chapter of town bred dandy versus country bred dandy. I also kind of grew up in a quite a kind of it's outer suburbia, kind of on the verge of the countryside. So I'm also not a city boy, and I'm not really a country boy either. So yeah, it's we contain all sorts of liminalities in the UK and indeed specifically in England.
Welcome to PequodPod, the podcast on the wonder world of Herman Melville. My name is Tristan Bavel Marquise.
I'm Meg.
And call me Johnny.
And today we're talking about The Street. In my edition here, a lovely 2-page chapter. We'll see how long we can talk about it for. Meg, why don't you give us why don't you give us a little bit of a synopsis of this one as you do so lovely for us each time.
So, The Street, coming off of breakfast, Ishmael left the inn, and here he is walking about the street directly outside. This is his first daylight stroll in New Bedford. He starts to realize the thing that we posited at the end of Counterpane, which feels like years ago, which is that it's kind of hitting him that in this context, Queequeg is not that weird of a person here. Rather, he himself, Ishmael, is like a rookie in this scene. And that he's unprepared to kind of see such cosmopolitan people, or as he calls them, the queerest looking nondescripts, as exist here in New Bedford, this port town, even more so than in Manhattan, which is Broadway, or Chestnut Street in Philadelphia, or Regent Street in London. In summary, we kind of zoom out, and then he talks about how the new in towns dress kind of goofy, that the real estate is really expensive because of the whale oil. We get a lovely passage I particularly like about how the fathers give whales as dowries. And then in one of those sort of weird, very Melvillian, almost kind of proto-Victorian things where it feels like not the narrator, but the author is just kind of leaving us with a hot take about nothing in particular, but he's using like the most lyrical, beautiful language possible. He ends the chapter talking about the ladies of New Bedford and Salem, a point to which we will never really return.
Yeah.
To the lesser, I would talk about the beautiful women of Salem all day. Beautiful women of Salem, call me. In any case, it's a weird place to end when you look at the place that we started, but that's certainly something that happens in many, many chapters of this book.
The Salem reference is really interesting, though, especially if my edition's notes are to be believed, and they're by Herschel Parker, so I assume they can be, because it says this tall story about Salem girls is a private joke for Nathaniel and Sophia Hawthorne, who were both Salemites.
I believe it, yes. One of the things, so we're coming on the heels of just having recorded earlier before this episode, little glimpse behind the curtain for our audience of our fantastic Melville at the Movies episode 1, which you can find on Patreon. And in that one, notably, the women of New Bedford don't seem to be quite so lovely, as we get in this description. Do we think so?
Which is not a sin. But
is
certainly not
purposeful by our director? You know, he like the opposite was like, bring me the 50 most beautiful women you know, or even the 50 most, just go to like the grocery store and find 50 women. It's like they're dour, they're unsmiling, their way that they're dressed is to just make them look as grim as possible, which is a choice.
But
literally, that is a choice. Yeah, but here they're beautiful.
Yeah. Also, it has to be said that in the film we see them on the day that they go down to the docks to potentially set eyes on their husbands, brothers, children for the last time. Yeah. So if I had to go and do that, I don't think I'd look my best either.
Yeah, I look terrible at like the gas station. It's not a. I'm certainly not condemning the
Yeah.
individuals in the story, but you do have to think, why these actors, why these extras?
Counterpoint, we
saying
get
then?
a close up on the one woman in the crowd who like conspicuously has facial hair.
And that's her inalienable right as a citizen.
Good
Yeah,
for her.
yeah, yeah.
No shade November.
Starbucks wife in the movie is quite lovely. So at least we got that. Okay, so
I
getting
only
into
want
the
to see hot women from here on out.
Hey, look, they're all hot in their own way in that film.
That's
and, you
true.
know,
That's true. Not Houston's strong point, I will say. In any
Yeah.
case, everyone looks weird on the street.
That
They
is
do.
true. Johnny, what do you think of that?
What's interesting is that we get this, and again, to Meg's point, that we are suddenly realizing that Queequeg is not quite as curious an individual as Ishmael initially thought. Suddenly, that gets played out on this sort of citywide stage, and we get this enormous kind of panoply and gallery of figures, all of whom exist in complete harmony, it seems, with the people that Ishmael would think of as looking quote unquote normal. And so it's a nice little land-bound foretaste of what we're going to get on board the Pequod, which is this extraordinary world stage in miniature. And so, yeah, it's a literalization in a certain sense of the expansion of Ishmael's world that we've seen in progress over the previous 5 chapters.
Yeah, I think that is right, and I think like we really get this like idea of the expansion of Ishmael's like conceptual horizons in that first sentence, where if I had been astonished at first catching a glimpse of so outlandish an individual as Queequeg circulating among the polite society of a civilized town, that astonishment soon departed upon taking my first daylight stroll through the streets of New Bedford. So yeah, I think like you're absolutely right. Very critical here is like the growth of Ishmael's perceptions as a character, or like his understanding of the nautical world. What do we think of some of these like specific allusions? We do get Wapping, which is in your neck of the woods, Johnny. What do you know about Wapping? Do you go there frequently?
I know very little about Wapping, which is a great failing on my part. Yeah, I do live in London. I was also, we also have a reference to Water Street, which is in Liverpool. I was in Liverpool on tour last week. I'm going back there in a couple of weeks, so I'll have to. And I didn't have the good fortune to go to Water Street when I was there last time, so I'll have to seek it out when I'm there next time. I'll try and take a picture of myself on Water Street.
Yeah, we'll put it on Instagram. Yeah, that'll be good.
I think this is a good example of you can sort of see the machinations of Melville trying to get his audience prepared to go on the whaling ship through getting Ishmael ready to go on the whaling ship. You can sort of, every once in a while, I think it's useful when you're sort of thinking about writing your own project, like why not start 50 pages further in? And his argument is, I can't just drop my presumably Anglo reader into a dazzling multicultural crew in the middle of the ocean and have them buy that Ishmael would feel so affectionate towards them, or whatever he thought. That's all speculative on my part, of course, but I don't think is wildly off the mark. But rather, he is showing us sort of step by step Ishmael starting out very shocked and surprised by the fact that he is expected to not make a fuss about sharing a bed with a non-white person. And now he's sort of, I think this moment is very cinematic. You can sort of imagine him like the doors opening and he steps out onto, and then like the sun is shining and you can hear the seagulls and you can see sort of the masts in the background behind the buildings, and the people on the street are all, you know, talking to each other in this sort of polyglot, you know, fog of language. And then everyone is not white. And that would be a moment of education, cultural sort of education, or reliteracy for Ishmael. It's one for Melville's reader as well, which I think is why we're spending the time to do it.
Yeah, and it paves the way beautifully for Midnight Forecastle as well, doesn't it? Where you say that we see like a wonderfully kind of polyglot community here, although it's actually bereft of dialogue, this chapter, but
Yes, all summarized.
You can imagine, you can imagine the sound of the street. It's implied beautifully, and then that actually gets dramatized for us when we're on board the ship. So I think that's a really lovely read of what we're actually seeing here, and the kind of the cinematic quality as well. Maybe it's just because we've just been talking about the Gregory Peck film,
maybe. But I think we've seen this scene in movies a lot, which is when like the Rube goes into the stock market for the first time, or her college for the first time, or I've never been in like a thing. There's always a scene where it's like, oh, I'm part of a big machine now, and I'm seeing people in costume I've never seen. They're speaking, even if it's English, it's like a subset of like
a pidgin.
Yeah. And so I think this is a very familiar scene to readers and watchers of film, TV, books, etc. So I think it's cute to sort of see it here. In this proto version of like I think it's winning and sort of affectionate to think of Ishmael with his like jacket looking perhaps like one of these guys who's like, all right, I looked like an idiot, but it's because I didn't have the right pants yet. Give me a couple days to get the pants.
The closest parallel that's coming to mind, or at least the most immediate one, is when Flick the Ant goes to the city in Disney Pixar's A Bug's Life. Do you remember that?
You're so right.
When he's got his little leaf cap on and the little leaf backpack, and he's looking like a little suburban boy, and then in he goes into the really...
Like, get out of the way!
Yeah, exactly. And then what does he find? A lovely ragtag, and I might add queer-coded bunch of insects who come and help him to deal with their grasshopper problem.
Am I watching A Bug's Life later? Two great movies about ants that came out almost concurrently. What a world!
Oh yes, then
ants with the Z.
Ants with the
yeah. And A Bug's Life is famously a bug retelling of Akira Kurosawa's Seven Samurai, which also has a similar kind of scene.
Oh my goodness! I didn't know that.
Oh yeah,
Amazing.
Oh, superb! It's the first film I ever went to see at the cinema. So there we go.
Go on.
Seven Samurai or Bug's Life?
A Bug's Life.
Nice. That's good.
Finally, I'm a beautiful butterfly.
The other thing we get is sort of like. You have all these crazy things happening in London or New York or whatever, but, New Bedford's got all that beat because we've got here savages outright, many of whom yet carry on their bones unholy flesh.
Well, it's becoming quite a recurring Melvillian tactic that we've seen at work in previous chapters, and we're absolutely going to see it at work elsewhere, potentially nowhere more so than in The Whiteness of the Whale, where he says, well, you know about this, and you know about this, and you know about this thing, but all of this cannot stack up to this thing that I'm describing here. We even get the phrase, I don't think it comes up in this chapter, but he even uses phrases like all this and yet, and he gives us a whole kind of barrage of stuff that for us to bring it to mind, and he says, okay, but here's how I'm describing is going beyond that.
Yeah, I think this is kind of a scene or a technique that we've seen him use a couple times, which is to list real things and then seem to kind of counterbalance it with something that feels unreal or is, as we've seen in other places, just completely made up. So perhaps it would be more useful to look at the beginning of the third paragraph when he's listing the people from these...
Sure.
Like Malaysia or these islands in the South Pacific, which are all real, except I think the last one.
Yeah, the Brigians are the only ones that are apparently not real.
Not actually something real. If I read this with my mind in August 2026 without looking it up, I don't know what any of these really mean. I can, but just with looking at my eyes... And yet, reading a list of examples makes me think that the author knows what they're talking about. Maybe he's made these all up from like Star Wars. That's not true. There's just like, they're place names that we wouldn't use now to talk about people from real islands, and these people are real. But without looking them up, I just go, oh, this author knows what he's talking about. Ishmael knows what he's talking about. This is a cosmopolitan place. I would meet people here that I don't even know the place name of. And that both makes me feel like, oh, I'm kind of uneducated as to the people of the world, which is true. And also, Ishmael is contrasting his past and present self as now he knows those names. When back in the day it was just a wash of savages and he didn't have the language or even the possibly desire to pick out, oh, these people are from Malaysia, these people are from Fiji.
Yeah.
It speaks beautifully to what you were saying earlier, Meg, about Ishmael really strongly serving as a surrogate for us at this point. And yeah, absolutely, we get this kind of this Gatling gun of places kind of fired at us. And yeah, I think the expectation is that we're not going to know where all of these places are, whether it's Wapping or whether it's one of the South Sea Islands. I think, and I think that's testified to by the fact that one of these places is absolutely not real. Like even the most educated or the most informed person in the world would look at this list and find something unfamiliar. It's calculated to kind of isolate us in a certain way.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to narrator Ishmael's like later knowledge. So like that list, the Fijians, Tongata Boers, Aromangoans, and Penangians and Brigians, like the idea that like Ishmael now can distinguish between these people that like might have all kind of blended together maybe in the past. Do you get the sense that like he's sort of got this mastery of sort of like a encyclopedic raciality, I suppose?
I think that's probably the case, Tristan. Yeah, and that resonates quite nicely with something that comes up later in the chapter. We get another classic instance of Ishmael appropriating the status of whaleman for himself, even before the Ishmael to whom the events of the narrative are happening has stepped foot on the ship. We get, had it not been for us whalemen, that tract of land would this day perhaps have been in as howling condition as the coast of Labrador. Of course, we have to remember that Ishmael isn't one of those, isn't a whaleman at this point. So yeah, absolutely, we're getting the narrating Ishmael's knowledge is kind of being foregrounded, even as the continued relative ignorance of the avatar Ishmael who's being narrated is being exposed.
So do you view this as being later narrator Ishmael making the claim of being like talking about us whalemen, or do you think this is in the story
I suspect
Ishmael?
It's more weighted at least towards the narrating Ishmael, so the sort of the post end of the text Ishmael. I think it's interesting that we jump into the way that even that first sentence is constructed. If I had been astonished at first catching a glimpse of so outlandish an individual as Queequeg, he's taking us a step back in the narrated Ishmael's experience and saying, well, if I in the past felt that way, imagine my surprise when this thing slightly later happened. And so even in terms of the kind of grammar and syntax of the chapter, I think that it's the retrospective Ishmael that's being given, if not entirely, at least the majority of the spotlight here.
Yeah, I want to dwell for a minute on so we've got here, but a New Bedford, actual cannibals stand chatting at street corners, savages outright, many of whom yet carry on their bones unholy flesh. What's our interpretation of that? Like, what do you think is meant by yet carry on their bones unholy flesh? I think like the yet there is like intriguing to me. I can get, okay, like they've got unholy flesh as like a general thing, but like the yet means that they would lose that quality of having unholy flesh at some point. Like, do we think that's like conversion to Christianity would like make it so that they're not carrying unholy flesh, or are they is it unholy flesh in that they're cannibals and have eaten somebody and like they've ingested that unholy flesh, and that's the unholy flesh that's being talked about?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think both of those readings can potentially be active at once. I mean, it could be one of those instances where Melville contrives to have his cake and eat it. I think there's enough ambiguity there to allow both of those to possibly be true. Something that makes me think that potentially my reading would be more towards the conversion reading is that this chapter occurs only a few chapters before the Ramadan, which is where we will get very much the narrated Ishmael lecturing Queequeg on quote unquote pagan Ramadans and fasting. So that's my instinctive thought on that, though I don't know, maybe Meg feels differently.
I think that sounds right. I think for me it means that they're non-Christian. And you can be, I think you might be able to be non-Christian and not a savage in this world, but pretty much it seems like that's at least from what Ishmael is able to articulate in New Bedford, it's kind of either or, especially when you're walking around and haven't met anyone yet. Yeah, I think it also could just be Melville was like, what's a cool ass line? And it, do we need to look at it? Of course, every line you can look at it as closely as you want, but I think it's kind of just a cool thing to say. Carry on their bones, unholy flesh. I think, if for me, it means that they have not converted to Christianity and are perhaps repeatedly having to resist the advances, as it were, in order to get their paychecks, but that they resolutely maintain their status of not converting.
Yeah. So there's a lot of comedies this chapter, and I think we've been talking a lot about the Fijians and the cannibals and the unholy flesh, but what's given to us as more curious and certainly more comical are the green Vermonters and New Hampshire men, all athirst for gain and glory in the fishery.
Well, here we return, actually, don't we, to something that we were picking up on when we were talking about breakfast, because we get a return of the image of the Green Mountains, and we were talking about what greenness might mean in the context of this text, and of course Ishmael character wants to insist that he's not green in the sense that he's not inexperienced. So it's one of those things that, oh my goodness, whatever it means, Melville needs us to see it. We're looking. I mean, in my edition, the image comes up on one page and then the next. So it's the fact that this image is being reused within the space of a single page is really, really striking.
I like how it's using the costume as a way to illustrate incompetence, that he comes in the country bred, the downright bumpkin dandy. It's a great turn of phrase. He comes in and he's like, I'm going to be a whaler.
I love that phrase.
And gets the costume of whaling. It's sort of picturesque, stereotypical, you think the leather is fresh, fresh leather, that's a thing. But he gets like suspenders and like the buttons all done correctly. And then Melville has, whoever's narrating this chapter, he's like, the button they're going to break. As soon as you're actually in a storm, all this nice stuff that you've got isn't going to work, because for some reason the trappings of the job are not actually the equipment, and the way that you're going to dress after you've done the thing is wildly different than the costume that you wore before. So perhaps sort of he's using coming to town with certain sort of all you're like, oh, I'm going to be a thing, and sort of the Halloween costume that you get is not the real doctor's coat, not the real fireman's jacket. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's the sense that they've got all the gear and no idea.
Yeah.
And that's just so comically
even dangerous. Yeah.
Absolutely. And they're actually set in really strong contrast, aren't they, with Ishmael's drastic under preparations for the trip, with just the two shirts in the carpet bag.
And Queequeg's weird hodgepodge of like the hat and the jacket and the thing. And he's like,
yeah, but Queequeg's done this loads of times before, so he knows what he needs.
Knows what works.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, so when I read that section, due to my unfamiliarity with like the wardrobe, I'm almost does this wardrobe make sense? Like, do we know like whether this combination of, so like he wears a beaver hat and a swallow-tailed coat, girdled with a sailor belt and a sheath knife. The sheath knife and the beaver hat seem to be practical enough. I don't know about the swallow-tailed coat, though. Do we know if the swallow-tailed coat makes sense with the sailor wardrobe, or wearing a sou'wester and a bombazine cloak?
Gosh. Well, I think
Queequeg, that would work.
First of all, Queequeg has a beaver hat, doesn't he? So that, so far so good.
Yes, beaver hat's good.
I'm not completely sure what a bombazine cloak is, I have to say. Does Parker offer us anything?
A bombazine cloak is a historical outer garment made from bombazine, a heavy twilled fabric traditionally woven with a silk warp and a worsted wool weft, usually dyed a deep matte black. These cloaks were most popular during the Victorian era as a formal mourning wear.
So they're heavy and not at all conducive to taking care of your ship during a storm. Yeah.
It's going to get wet. It's
And,
get
so a
soaked.
sou'wester is like an impermeable hat, isn't it? So interesting that two different kinds of hat seem to be part of the uniform.
Yeah. So I think my favorite line from this chapter, and it's like been stuck in my head. It's all my passwords.
Oh,
now,
good.
So please don't hack me. But is downright
Oh my goodness.
bumpkin dandy.
I mean,
love
this
downright
the one
bumpkin
thing that I
dandy.
have just written in the margins next to that paragraph is tag yourselves. Yeah, town bred dandy, country bred dandy, or downright bumpkin dandy. Everyone is one. Every friendship group has one of these, and if you think that they don't, then you are that one. I think is probably how it goes.
Okay. All right. So which one are you? Who's our town?
I don't think
I
it's
think
me.
most of us are town bred. Suburbs, that would be more like the town. All right.
No,
Yeah,
I'm
that's
definitely not
true.
town
Bred one. A town bred dandy with nice gloves.
Yeah. I'm definitely an exurbs.
Well, all right. I'll volunteer as tribute as the
Yeah.
podcast downright bumpkin dandy.
I don't think you can have a London zip code and do that.
True, although I wasn't born in London, so
Okay. Maybe you did come all naive and you were wearing last season's shoes.
sheath knife.
Yeah. No one uses those anymore.
But so yeah, like the downright bumpkin dandy, like we get this like interesting description, and it kind of plays into like what we were talking about for a couple chapters now. Is so he in the dog days will mow his 2 acres in buckskin gloves for fear of tanning his hands, which I think is an interesting. Like we get again like this reference to complexion and this reference as it relates to nautical know-how, or like being like a like a real sailor is going to be like tanned. And so the downright bumpkin dandy who's now coming is this comical figure who like seems to be like worried about tanning, even though he's trying to go on the whale ship.
Yes, and it's interesting that we get this specific reference to wanting to protect their hands, knowing that we get a really significant chapter in quite a few chapters' time, a squeeze of the hand, which is one of the possibly the most queer-coded chapter in the entire text. And we know that everyone has to be involved in that process, and you cannot be wearing gloves for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or even like I'm going to try to use a literary term, and I'll let you correct me when I get this wrong.
I'm sure we won't need to.
Is metonymy like the part for the whole? Which one's the part for the whole?
So you've got metonymy and you've got synecdoche.
Okay, so the hand, like a ship's hand, it refers to the person, right?
Yes. So that is, Meg, correct me if I'm wrong, that's synecdoche, right? Whereas a metonym is, for example, Washington has yet to comment on this. It doesn't mean that's a metonym, whereas synecdoche is referring to a part as the whole.
Yeah, so our downright downright bumpkin dandy, is afraid to tan his hands. The hands being like the synecdoche for the sailor.
Yeah, that's right.
That would be
absolutely.
Yes. Or as Johnny would say, is it Downing Street? It means the government.
That's right. Precisely. Precisely.
I think this is funny. We think it's almost like a trope now of like when the mild youth comes to town and wants to get a job. And there's always the scene of like the overseer who's like, let me see your hands. And they're always like lily white. And he's like, these are a woman's hands. They've never seen work. And he's like ashamed. But all the veterans are like all grizzled. There's a great scene in Kitchen Confidential, which I'm trying to finish so I can go see Tony. Where he burns his hand on like a skillet or something, and he like very meekly is like, does anyone have a Band-Aid? And they're like, you idiot, look at my hands. And they're like heinous and like, wrapped in scars and like unhealed, it's just like, it's disgusting. But yeah, we've talked about skin a lot, but I think it's really interesting here that preserving the hands is singled out as a microcosm of the body as the whole, as the thing that learns to do the task by way of like maturing or transfiguring in some way. I don't know if, yeah, I don't know if we get hands again quite so intimately until that chapter. Oh, that chapter is incredibly intimate. But yeah, hand meaning as sort of the stand-in for the body, and then the body being a stand-in also for like the spirit of the whaler. We sort of get smaller and smaller. I think it makes sense that the hand is going to be the thing that he would focus on.
Yeah. And we had it in our interview with Dr. Hester Blum. We get with the universal thump is passed around, and all hands should rub each other's shoulder blades and be content. I did get to see a picture of her tattoo. It came out very good with all the hands pointing. I like that. Another great reference, like you're talking about, Meg, is in Jaws, where Quint asks to see the marine biologist's hands and calls them, these are money counting hands.
It's a great in-crowd thing. Like it's a way to sort of, I don't know if gatekeep is the right word here, but like to tell a country rube as someone whose hands are clean, the way that women would have protected their hands to show that they didn't work.
Yeah.
It's like something that would have to be beaten out of this country guy before he was actually not just wearing a costume, but having pants that like didn't disintegrate after a storm. Another metaphor for that is that he's like developing physical calluses.
Yeah, and specifically like a country dandy, right? Like I think like normally when we think of like a country person, like they have the rustic hands. But like the country dandy,
because a dandy is someone fussy with their clothes, like not just I want to have nice clothes. It's it's a more extreme term. So he's saying again, we're kind of thinking of a country person, perhaps to also use sort of unfair or unkind stereotypes as someone who has like worked the field and his hands would be already seasoned. But saying a country dandy is someone who might even more than a city dandy want to distance himself from the people who worked in his house, some of whom may not have been paid. You know what I'm saying? So like that person wearing gloves might even be more neurotic about not tanning to show how much he doesn't do any field work.
I like
it.
That.
Makes me think of that lovely exchange between Touchstone and Corin in As You Like It, which is the Shakespeare's great court versus country play, and you get a kind of characters that are often played as kind of court dandies having to kind of take to the Forest of Arden, and there is a whole exchange about why you don't kiss hands in the country in that kind of that kind of courtly way, and Corin says, well, they are often tarred over with the surgery of our sheep, and would you have us kiss tar? Like it's like there's a practical sense to why we do not. Why people who are not of the town or of the court use they have to use their hands in very, very different ways, and so the kind of the semantics of the hand and the kind of the all of that kind of thing is completely negated. And a similar thing is going on here with our dandy figure trying to protect his hands while going to sea.
So moving on into the description of New Bedford, I think we have like a very interesting description of New Bedford as this place that is like has this wealth to it, but you wouldn't like know it from like the place itself, or like the natural resources like evident in the place itself. So we get this, it is a land of oil, true enough, but not like Canaan, a land also of corn and wine. The streets do not run with milk, nor in the springtime do they pave them with fresh eggs, which I think is a very interesting image. I'm curious, do we have any sort of sense if that's like any sort of allusion to anything? It seems like an odd thing to do, to pave the streets with fresh eggs. Well, it's an interesting turn of phrase.
People have been doing it during the heat wave in the UK, just cracking eggs on the streets and frying them. So I mean, that's it's remarkably prescient as an image. But no, I don't know of any kind of intertextual reference. There may well be one.
No, I like it though. It's a fun one.
what's lovely in part about it, and it's occurring to me just hearing you read that, Tristan, is once again we have something, or in this case somewhere, described predominantly in terms of what it isn't. It's not like Canaan. The streets do not run with milk, nor in the springtime do they pave them with fresh eggs. And then he goes on to tell us what it is. And this happens time and time again. It's so interesting as a recurring technique.
Yeah. And I think it really points to the principal nature of like whaling to New Bedford, that like basically we get after that, yet in spite of all this, nowhere in all America will you find more patrician-like houses, parks, and gardens more opulent than in New Bedford. Whence came they? How planted upon this once scraggy scoria? Scraggy scoria is a great turn of phrase as well of a country. But yeah, the setting it up as a place that can like really only exist in this level of opulence by the exploitation of ocean resources, I think is like interesting.
Yeah, and then he goes on in the following paragraph to answer those questions, if only metaphorically. Go and gaze upon the iron emblematical harpoons round yonder lofty mansion, and your question will be answered. Yes, all these brave houses and flowery gardens came from the Atlantic, Pacific, and Indian Oceans. One and all, they were harpooned and dragged up hither from the bottom of the sea. And that resonates really interestingly with something that came up in the previous chapter. I think we even spoke about the fact that in that chapter there was a strong sense of the ship as an artificial land. And here it seems to me that the opposite is happening, right? The inhabited human world here is metaphorically of the water.
Yeah.
And potentially it's even there's even a suggestion that we as a global society and even actually as biological beings, right, are in a very literal sense, we are ontologically of the water. And there's a sense here that this kind of, this land-bound space is in some measure, its existence depends on the water in more ways than one.
Yeah, it's an interesting passage to read. So our listeners may not know this because it'll be a little bit before you hear this, but Johnny recorded a fantastic guest interview episode with Dr. Steve Mentz, where a lot of this sort of stuff gets talked about. But I think it's a very interesting one that lends itself to sort of a blue humanities approach, like this particular passage. We're thinking about like New Bedford as a space.
Yeah, I think it does. I think you're absolutely right. Especially in terms of the ways that it seems to blur the boundaries between the land and the sea and what life means in between those two spaces, whether those two spaces are actually separable things. I think there's a suggestion here that in some way they're not. Yeah.
So right after the part that you quoted, we get this, can Herr Alexander perform a feat like that? Did y'all do any digging onto this character?
Yeah, he was a magician.
A
right?
German magician.
Yeah.
So it's like he's saying, can David Blaine do this? To which I can only say, no. I think there's a limit to what he can do. Yeah, I think that's funny. That's really funny.
Oh, do we know of any great tricks that Herr Alexander performed?
No, I'm afraid I don't.
His name is Alexander Heimburger. German listeners, sorry. What do you do with the U when it's got the umlaut on top of it? What do you do with that vowel in your throat?
Which letter?
It's Heim and then Burger, but the U has the umlaut on it. So I think you do something interesting.
Bürger.
Heim. Yeah, there you go. That's a German name, all right. Used to be a magician. Yeah, what were magic tricks in like 1840? What do we want to say? Could we do like stage illusions, like that thing with like the mirror, and you could put sort of like the Haunted Mansion picture on like glass? Could we do that then?
Okay, so I've got, I found it on Wikipedia, typical Herman show. Okay, so the following is a description of a typical Herman show as seen through the eyes of a spectator. After much fanfare from the orchestra, Herman entered. He was decked out in black velvet evening clothes with breeches. He wore the typical top hat of the day and white gloves. The audience applauded, he bowed and smiled. He took off his gloves and made them vanish between his hands. Herman presented 2 metal cones and a beautifully decorated brass vase. He opened the lid on the vase and showed a bag of rice. All items were examined by spectators. Upon return of the items, Herman poured the rice into the vase and placed the lid on it. He went into the audience, walked over to a bearded gentleman and borrowed his hat. He reached over to the gentleman's beard and produced an orange from it. Thank you, just what I needed for the trick.
Yeah, this is
And
not
then
the
I guess it does.
prestige. Okay.
So,
I mean,
yeah,
I
that
can't do
kind of
any of
thing.
these things either. But yeah, it sort of sounds like maybe what we would come up with like, it's in this hand and it's on that side of the table, and then I'm making a rose appear. Cool. So no, I don't think he would be able to bring houses up from the bottom of the sea.
No. Steal his
Yeah.
look, though.
Oh,
Oh, my
so-
God.
sounds very kind of tuxedo
top hat of the
mask-esque.
Yeah, a top hat of the period and a velvet cape. Yes, please.
Let's go. Ooh. Yeah, that's distinctive. That's distinctive. Yeah, that is a funny
Yeah.
shout out to a topical personality.
Yeah, and yeah,
Yep.
but I think you're right, Meg. Sleight of hand tricks do not New Bedford pull from the ocean.
No, for sure.
No. So I do like also, so moving on from there, I love the detail about fathers giving whales for dowers, and especially like portion off their nieces with a few porpoises apiece. There's a lovely alliteration to
That's
that line.
wonderful. Yeah, it's so beautifully constructed, that sentence.
And then another thing that I like, living in the day of being able to have lights on in your house without like burning something, at least like not immediately like in your house in order to have that light. The idea of like opulent wealth being a product of being able to like continually have light into the evening. Like in kind of like a wastefully so, or like exuberantly so.
Yeah.
So like when we get this, you must go to New Bedford to see a brilliant wedding, for they say they have reservoirs of oil in every house, and every night recklessly burn their lamps and spermaceti candles.
Yeah, of course. And what we're getting there, yeah, you're right. It is conspicuous and needless opulence at the expense of the whale.
At the expense of the whale. And then like, yeah, just like thinking about like access to more lighted time as like being like a something that like really like requires a large amount of wealth to do. It's like kind of, I don't know, something I don't think about much in my day-to-day life, but like kind of the rationale behind like the whole industry is extending the day basically into the night.
Yeah, and it's another way in which light permeates the text as well. It becomes quite a significant motif. And of course, in part, that's motivated by the fact that the sperm whale that is hunted so predominantly in the text is a source of light when the oil is burned. But then we think ahead to, for example, to the try-works, where we get this huge kind of pyrotechnic kind of display. It's an early instance of the way in which kind of burning and kind of flame is going to be used to great effect later on in the text as well. And again, also very, very explicitly linked to the destruction of the body of whales.
I think that, it seems like a momentum in these final paragraphs is the sort of unnatural beauty of that the town is able to use through this wealth, that
Very
they
much
can
so.
extend light past the darkness. And that I think, if I'm understanding this paragraph, that New Bedford has created this flowery landscape where there was not one before. The scraggy scoria of sort of the New England landscape, they have transformed it because the wealthy people there would prefer it to look like this. So the language is kind to the people. He's not saying that these are wasteful, but Johnny, as you just said, that's our, I think the correct interpretation is we're supposed to sort of take a step back and then say, should we be? I think it could be, yes. Yeah. I think the sort of the unnaturality that the people in the town are able to create is a way to appreciate how crazy rich they are, that they can change, that they can bring these towns out from the ocean.
And it's interesting, actually, in the light of what you've just said, that's actually that some of this process of establishing and developing and beautifying the space, it's framed in terms of artistic creation. So omnipotent is art which in many a district of New Bedford has superinduced bright terraces of flowers upon the barren refuse rocks thrown aside at creation's final day. There's almost a sense that there's like a mini renaissance that's happened here, that they've channeled some of this money generated by really, really destructive means in order to create art. It's really, really fascinating.
Yeah, another interpretation there too is like the artificiality of the place, where like this place, so there's these barren refuse rocks that like God cast aside at creation's final day, and like this feels like a very like the whole last few paragraphs is like kind of how naturally like bereft of like wealth or like means of sustaining oneself this place is. That's sort of like almost against like what might have been the will of God for this place is like transformed nonetheless in a way that seems like unstable.
Yeah, and therefore connecting the business of whaling to transgression in quite an explicit way, right?
Yeah. And I think we get in a later chapter Starbuck talk about we'll meet Starbuck later, and he talks about like the like kind of Christian nature of whaling, where like you're slaying these leviathans of the deep to create light. And like I think there's an interesting like religious angle to it where and we'll get to this a lot when we have our upcoming inscrutable malice interview. But like one of the means by which like both the God of the Old Testament, but like especially like the related myths of the ancient Near East, like creates the world is through conflict with a chaos monster of the sea. But the other way that God creates the world in the Bible is like starts by saying, "Let there be light." And so like you have in slaying the whale in order to create light, like you have this like kind of like these dual levels of like mythological creation, it like infused in one thing.
That's great. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
And maybe like to wrap us up, one of the things that like to me is like a fascinating aspect of attraction that we get in this last paragraph is when he talks about the young, like the musk, this like the sweet musk that the young girls of Salem breathe, and like that as being this alluring thing, which I don't know if in our 21st century society like we have the same sort of like connotations of attraction as it relates to the breath and the smell of the breath. I'm curious what y'all's interpretation of this is.
So is the sense there in that phrase, so elsewhere match that bloom of theirs ye cannot save in Salem, where they tell me the young girls breathe such musk, their sailor sweethearts smell them miles offshore. Is there the sense that they are exhaling, and the sweetness of that breath is being picked up miles and miles offshore? Well, that's really interesting then to tie back to the previous chapter where Ishmael is going off on the musk of the sailors that he smells at breakfast in the Spouter Inn. So I think any attribute that we allow these Salem girls to have here, we also actually have to allow to that group of men as well. Formerly eruption of bears, and then the bashful bears.
Mm-hmm. It's I agree. It would be a word that would take a little more zhuzhing to sound sexy. I mean, musk is like an animal. I mean, it's certainly something that we still want in the fragrances that we buy. But I think maybe in the time between now and then, it has gotten connotations that make it kind of odd to read that sentence. I agree, sort of upon reading them, like the musk. Shouldn't it be? I don't know. That seems like heavier, and it's got like sweat and kind of the sort of like animal fur smell than I would necessarily have instinctively said, were I to describe the breath of like a beautiful sort of like young virgin waiting for her betrothed to come back, would necessarily describe that word. Maybe not, but it might just be Melville being Melville. This kind of just like putting a strange or a seemingly inorganic comparison just to make us think about connections or like how the metaphor is working or the natural world or something like that.
Yeah, I do know. So a near contemporary of Melville, Napoleon, in one of his letters to Josephine, in being like a kind of erotically excited to see her again, like instructs her not to wash up because like there's something about like the like kind of the natural smell of her that like is so exciting
Yeah.
to
I think
him.
Freud did that too, but he was a
So it might be
certified
like
freak
a
7 days a week. So like, could we be using, I don't know, is that what
Oh.
Melville wanted to say? Maybe he wasn't being that sexy, but maybe he was.
Yeah.
It's because he was talking about the Hawthorns in this paragraph.
I think that's possibly part
That's
of it.
true too.
He was just in a friskier frame of mind.
Could be. And also Salem indelibly has the connection to, like, for better or for worse, to witches. So
Yeah,
they could
absolutely.
they could be bewitching these sailors.
We're always
with,
interesting. Yeah.
Anyway, well, this has been a fun chapter, and I think it's a good place to end it as well. But next time, our next chapter, we start with the chapel, and then
We're going to
be
church.
We're going to
We
church.
will be there for about a month. Yep.
It's going to be a lot of fun. I will have a great time, I assure you. Jesus had the entire time.
I will worship like a dog at the shrine of Father Mapple. You've been listening to the PequodPod with Tristan Bevel Marquise, Meg Fancher, and Johnny Wiles. Our music is by Lost in the Loop, with sound engineering by Lauren Ayton. The show's artwork is by Delaney Garrett, and Tristan is on the synths. We want to say a big thank you to all of our supporters on Patreon. You can join them over at patreon.com/PequodPod for bonus content and for opportunities to help us keep the show running in ship-shape condition. Ratings and reviews also really help us out, so if you enjoy the show, please do express your thoughts and metaphysical yearnings in the review section wherever you're listening to the show. Tell your friends, tell your foes, tell the white whale on whom you're monomaniacally urged to be revenged. It all helps. Thanks for listening, and until next time, call us the Pequod.